ゴジラが近づいております。警備隊の指示に従って避難してください。
We are getting some truly extraordinary live images here in the studio.
Approximately 7 hours ago, something attacked the city. I don't know what it is.
Welcome to Tokyo Lives, a Giant Monsters podcast where the hosts truly believe that something will rise from the ocean and destroy us all. I'm Coleman.
And I'm Kyle.
For the last, I want to say, 3 or 4 episodes, we have complained about 2 things. Specifically, 2 gigantic movies
Yes.
that are on the precipice of release. And maybe not so much Kong, but King Kong and Godzilla, the Japanese 2016 version. These are these huge films that have a release date, and in Godzilla's case, are coming super quick. And up until 2 weeks ago, we had heard nothing on either of these films for the most part. Just some leaks, some random promotional pieces, like nothing major, nothing. We're not really seeing anything. It's crazy. It's just incredibly disappointing.
Right.
So we wake up today, we post a few things to the website, one of which is a rumor that we might get some Godzilla resurgence news tomorrow with some advanced ticket sales and stuff. Yeah. And out of nowhere, the Godzilla resurgence trailer drops.
Yep.
And we posted that. We're getting tons of comments and emails about it right now. And I can't believe this thing just snuck up on us.
Yeah. It really did sneak up on us like hardcore. I mean, I suppose in retrospect, thinking about it, I guess technically when it got posted, it was April 14th in Japan. Since they're a day ahead of us, technically. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's the day that the tickets went on sale, so it makes sense that it came out. But just all of us were expecting it tomorrow. Like, nobody was thinking, like, oh, it'll come out later today. And it just blasted in out of nowhere and just took everyone by surprise. And the internet's been a storm about it. And as far as Kong goes, at the MTV Movie Awards, I think it was last weekend.
It was Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday. They had a little behind the scenes feature showing some of our first footage of the film. No monster stuff, no Kong, no nothing. But they showed us general information about the film, pretty much of like what does the time period look like, what does the island look like, who are the actors in it. And it was just a lot of information just kind of got dumped in that thing, even though it wasn't maybe what our listeners are really wanting to see. But there's some little snippets within that news that is very, very interesting.
So let's jump in and talk about the Kong footage first. I was really surprised by it not really showing us too much, but I really enjoyed what I saw. I mean, I had not really that many expectations for this film yet. We know it's going to set up more of the kaiju universe that Legendary is trying to build with Godzilla and King Kong and whatever else they're going to bring into that. But we didn't really know much about this film. Is it a reboot? What's it going to do? And we learned that it's from Tom Hiddleston. He did some interviews that basically this is going to be not a reboot, but kind of a soft reimagining of the story set in the 70s with new characters. It's not going to be them filming a movie or anything like that. It's going to be a new take on it. Samuel L. Jackson, Brie Larson, Tom Hiddleston, John Goodman. He's a wily one. You got to find him in the pictures. But no. This is a completely new take on Kong. And just from the little snippets we saw a giant skeleton of Kong. Yeah. Not of the Kong in the movie, but either a rival or an ancestor or something. We saw a skeleton of the same species that is just massive.
Yeah. I mean, the skeleton is like, when the image that is on our website and in the actual footage itself shows a couple of people, like 2 or 3 people actually walking through the mouth of the skeleton. And it looks like they could fit comfortably inside the mouth of the skeleton. So, while not Godzilla size, it's not 100 meters tall or whatever. This thing's got to at least be 40 meters, if not 50 meters tall. So, if that is how big Kong himself is going to be. I could see them easily finding a way either for him to stay that height and fight Godzilla, because that's about the same height as the Muto male was in 2014, or, doing something to make him grow consistently. Like either his species never stops growing, so whenever we meet him in 2020 when he's fighting Godzilla, he's going to be like a really old ape that's just going to be huge. Or maybe they are, there's so many things with this that we don't know, but it's all speculation at this point. The biggest thing that you can tell though is this Kong skeleton is way bigger than most of us anticipated.
Which is good because, I mean, whether you see it as, maybe this is an ape that Kong killed of the same species, it makes sense that, seeing this, they could size up the actual hero Kong,
right?
Even more so, and so I think we're within the parameters of a good fight now.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is the proof of that. So, on top of that, we also saw Samuel L. Jackson running around with some military types. We know that Tom Hiddleston plays a British SAS officer.
Yes.
So he's got some training and background in that. That'll give him the heroic action scenes I think we're all looking for in a classic Kong story. Outside of that, I just thought the cinematography looked great. It was very modern. It's very weird to see a modern setting of Skull Island. Very Vietnam-esque with a lot of the military garb and weapons, harkening back to that time frame and that war specifically. So
yeah, definitely.
If I were to guess, we're going to get some pretty harsh imagery with the native islanders this time around.
Yeah, and there's hints towards that in the footage too. There's the shot of an explosion. There's a shot of the village on fire. So there's a lot of little things that I think they will definitely pull in some of that Vietnam War imagery on. I think that it's very interesting because in all the footage, and I pointed this out to you when the footage actually happened, is it really does look like that there may be two teams of people on the island. Sam Jackson's character and John Goodman, as we searched and found him, are in one set, and then Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson and a couple of other people are in the other group of people. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm just, this is all speculation, but I'm guessing that either Sam Jackson's company is going to be out to rescue Tom Hiddleston and them, or they're going to be there for a completely different reason, and they're almost going to be the villains of the story. Maybe they're going to be the ones that are coming to ransack the island, and the others are the people that are coming there to study what's going on here. But I think the biggest thing that is really interesting is, the look of the film from the quick snippets that we saw on the monitors is really cool. Not like any other Kong film we've ever seen before. The island setting, it looks like an island in the Pacific now. Like it has a very unique look to it that is different from, say, Peter Jackson's Kong, which just kind of had that dark, generic jungle look to it. This looks very much like an island that you would find like out off the coast of Japan or off the coast of Vietnam or anything like that. Like it looks really, really, really cool.
Yeah, and not to stay too long on Kong, we are going to move on, but I do want to point out that a lot of the rumors and a lot of the hearsay from fans say that John Goodman's character and a couple of the other characters we see in just these quick shots probably going to have some connection to like Monarch.
Someone's going to.
That's going to be the Godzilla 2014 connection. There's talk. I mean, there's a lot of talk that we'll hear or see something of Godzilla in this film, like a superhero tease. I was surprised by that, but it's a rumor that will not go away.
Yeah, it wouldn't be too surprising if they... I feel like if they were to do some sort of, maybe not a post-credit sequence, but a mid-credit sequence with a hint towards Godzilla... I would not be surprised. Even if it was, maybe they'll do something like have Tom Hiddleston's character in makeup or something in 2014 or something like that. I don't know.
Or, you never know. I mean, they kind of established these Mutos as this generic monster race that they can kind of bring in whenever they want. It's what if we saw Kong fight a Muto? Like it's just a different Skull Island version.
No, yeah, and I mean that's the big mystery too, is if Kong is going to be this large, then what is he going to fight? Because I really don't see that him fighting a T-Rex if he is the size of the 54 Godzilla. Like, I feel like he is going to end up fighting actual other monsters instead of like the normal dinosaur type creatures that we see on a Skull Island. But now that we've seen actual footage and we've seen kind of what they're going for, it just really opens up a lot of possibilities. It's not as much speculating as it was before, whereas before we were kind of going off of no information. Now we're going off of little tidbits and we can actually kind of try to guess what's going on.
Exactly. So head over to TokyoLivesPodcast.com, where we actually did a breakdown of the trailer, scene by scene and shot by shot. Really interesting stuff. People have really been turned on to that. So check that out. Leave a comment. Moving on, the big news. I mean, I
the
love
most
Kong.
recent news.
Yeah, I love Kong, but oh wow, was it overshadowed today by the first real Godzilla Resurgence Shin Gojira trailer.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. As we said earlier, it really came out of nowhere. We knew we were probably going to get something in April at some point. I think we've mentioned that on the podcast before, that was the most likely thing that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not expect at the same time, we got more than I expected and less than I expected. Which is kind of strange to say, but I mean, I feel like the trailer itself is set up still like a teaser trailer. Like, it really is. Yes, we see footage of the suit in action, or CG in action. Yes, we see footage of the actors, but there's no dialogue. It's all just music. We still have no idea of the actual plot of this movie other than Godzilla appears. So, I mean, really, we know not much about this film. Other than what we see.
Yeah, what we know is that Godzilla appears and he is jacked up looking.
Yeah, he's real messed up.
If you've seen the leaks, if you've seen any of the promotional items so far, you know that Godzilla is missing skin. This is zombie Godzilla.
Yeah, he's not feeling too well.
And he's very demonic looking, very monstrous, more so than he's looked in a while, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. He's got this. He's got a really large grin on his face. Like, it's a weird, like, sadistic, like, look to his mouth because he has no lips, because I guess they got burned off by whatever happened to him. So, like, he's just got, I mean, you've seen the promotional picture of him. Like, he's got teeth, like, coming out of his jaw and stuff like that. But when you actually see the suit in its full motion, like, you can tell that, like, yeah, he's not feeling too hot. He's definitely been through some stuff.
And the thing about this is it's interesting. The reigning theory right now, and my personal favorite, is that this is the 1954 Godzilla regenerated from his bones, which makes sense because we're seeing weird snippets. Like, if you take it frame by frame, the trailer, you can see in one shot of his tail, he has a whale skeleton.
Yeah, or
like,
what we think is a whale skeleton.
It looks exactly like. I mean, people brought up some pictures, and it looks exactly like a whale skeleton embedded in his tail skin.
Yeah,
and so it's like, I mean, it makes sense. If he was at the bottom of the ocean, he was regenerating his skin, growing around just whatever fell.
Yeah.
In the time that he was regenerating. I mean, if this is the case, this is a slow regenerating Godzilla.
Which makes sense. If this is the 54 Godzilla, as far as we can tell, Resurgence seems to take place in the modern day. So, I mean, he's been regenerating for quite a while.
Look at it like the Heisei Godzilla that could super fast regenerate. Look at that as, Richard Donner's Superman movies versus this is our Man of Steel trying to be more realistic and gritty Godzilla.
I guess that's one way to put it. Kind of weird, but I guess that's one way.
I will make the Superman analogy whenever I can.
But I mean, I still have my reservations about the design. I think that, and we can't go too much into this, of course, because we got to get to our main topic of the night at some point tonight. But I think that the design works. It looks really cool because it has, like, a lot of red accents to it, which really accentuate, like, it looks like he's in pain. It does not look like once again, he's not feeling 100% himself. And he doesn't really, he doesn't seem to be walking at a really fast pace, which makes him look really stiff. But you brought this up earlier to me, was that, like, whenever if you just got, like, all your skin burned off and you're, like, trying to heal, you're not going to be able to walk at a really fast pace. You're not going to be able to move your stuff around too much because it's going to rip that flesh and, then you're going to have to heal again. So
I think a lot of the issues and problems that people are having with the design, I think they can all be traced back to that point of him being really hurt and missing most of his skin and being horribly burned. I think that's the deal with the small arms and the weird looking legs and the face. It's all jacked up. I think this all comes back to what will be a major part of the story is that Godzilla is barely alive.
Yeah.
And he's probably delusional with anger, which is great because then you can still have this heroic Godzilla that's just in so much pain. He's become this monster again. You can kind of play up both angles.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which way they go with it. I don't. There's a lot of things that I like about it. I really like the spikes. I really like his dorsal spines.
Mm-hmm.
I like that he has 5 rows. I like that the red is like really in between his spikes.
Yeah.
So it looks like his spikes are just like freshly growing, which makes sense because the original Godzilla suit only had 3 rows, and if it is the 54 Godzilla, he suddenly has 5, which means that like more spikes are growing as he's regenerating. So it's cool to see stuff like that.
I know people have a real issue with the tail. Mostly, I mean, people are obviously complaining about the lack of gravity affecting it, but the big thing I keep seeing pop up is the length. The length of the tail is crazy.
He has a really long tail. It's real long.
To that, I would just say, we are talking about a radioactive dinosaur that everything grew when he... I mean, some of the coolest pictures and fan art you see online of Godzilla have this crazy whip-like tail that almost looks like a Diplodocus tail. Or something like that. And I love that design. I love it. I think it's really cool and gives him really some extra reach as a weapon.
No, I like the long tail. The only thing that bothers me with it is the tail is super long, but they still treat it almost like it's not. For instance, there are some scenes in 85 where his tail is doing some crazy stuff. And when you look at how his tail is doing the crazy stuff, it looks weird, but it's not overly weird because it matches the body proportion that he has. Whereas this tail is like super long. It's the exact same length, or it's longer than his body, but they're making it do the same crazy stuff that it did in 85, and it doesn't look the same. It doesn't look right whenever the tail's
longer. It looks a little
longer.
weird, but I think that's the aesthetic they're going for. This looks off. It looks strangely formed. I think you compared it in your article that should post soon, aka tomorrow, another trailer breakdown, but of Shin Godzilla.
Yeah.
That it looks like just some meat. Like his face looks like meat that's been pounded.
Yeah, it literally looks like someone took a pound of ground beef and just like mashed it together to make a face. And then they added little googly eyes on it, and there you go. That's what his face kind of looks like.
This is Godzilla in round 12 of a bout fight with Muhammad Ali, and this is he's not getting out of this ring in one piece. So
I mean, as I really kind of am still holding on to the hope, and I feel like I'm probably deluding myself at this point that he is going to still regenerate to a full Godzilla by the end of the film. I just feel like that's going to happen because there is a little validity to my thoughts. The scene with him roaring at the very, very, very beginning of the trailer, he does look a little bit more filled out in the face. When I was doing my trailer breakdown, I was really looking at that shot, and I compared it to the shot of him just walking around, and it really does look like he has more skin over his face, like where his teeth are and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if maybe they're not going to do a full regeneration, but they're still going to make it look like he is healing.
Well, I mean, one of the oldest rumors we've heard of the film is that ever since the leaks of the pictures, there's been the rumor that he has 3 different forms in the movie. And whether that's true or not, we have no idea, but that's been a pretty long-standing rumor with the film that he goes through 3 stages.
Right. And I mean, I would like to see what this design looked like whenever it got its flesh back, is what I'm trying to say. Because this design itself is not bad. It's just there's some goofy aspects of it. And with it being such a serious film, I don't know if that's going to detract from it. Especially since, they're trying to compete with the 2014 Godzilla, which pretty much everybody fell in love with that design. So But yeah, no, I mean, it was great. I mean, the fact that we have footage of it. I mean, the movie comes out on July 29th in Japan. We still have no word on an American release date. Hopefully we'll get some news on that soon, at least for maybe a limited thing.
I mean, if they're giving the Japanese theater list tomorrow,
Yeah.
I would hope that they give some information on the American release.
I would hope so too, because it really does seem like, I mean, they gave it an American title, like, already. That, it's called Godzilla Resurgence in America. Like, the fact that they, like, beat themselves to the punch. They didn't, like, sell the rights to distribute the film and let the distributor decide on a title for the film. They made the title for the film as they released the title of the actual film to the public. So it's just kind of, you know what I mean? It's just very strange, and it seems like they have something planned, but they haven't said anything yet. And it is actually really strange. There are several blog posts from Toho where they refer to it as Godzilla Resurgence, and they say the release date is July 29th. So it is very, like, relating to the American title and then saying it's coming out on July 29th is very strange. Like, maybe they do have something up their sleeve that they want to save till closer till July 30th. You never know.
So that's our coverage for Godzilla Resurgence, at least right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully some more promotional teases and things come out, and we'll definitely bring them up on the show. In the meantime, again, head on over to TokyoLivesPodcast.com to watch the trailer if you haven't seen it already. Or tomorrow, on April 14th, we will have a trailer breakdown, each individual shot that we felt was most important, broken down with our opinions and our thoughts on how they fit into the film and where the film might be going.
Indeed. Well, I guess we never actually announced it at the beginning of this episode, but as you saw the title, we are talking about Pacific Rim tonight. And I think it's about time for us to get to the main topic, don't you?
Yeah, let's jump in.
The monster will destroy us all.
Prehistoric monsters.
The monster will destroy us all. Monster. The monster will destroy us all.
Prehistoric monsters.
The monster.
This monster you'll see. You think your bombs will stop him?
As we said, we are talking about Pacific Rim tonight. This is the 2013, I would dare say, classic giant monster kaiju versus mech American film by Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
This was a big deal when it came out. But first, I want to talk about your thoughts on Guillermo del Toro as a director, producer, artist.
I really like him. He has a very unique style and a unique way of working and making films. He's a big fanboy, is what he is, and in the best way. Sometimes you hear about these directors that are huge fans of the products that they're working on, and they like let it take over their brains, and then they don't do a good job. Whereas with him, like for instance with Hellboy, like he was a super fan of Hellboy growing up. And so whenever he focused on making Hellboy, he was like, I'm going to make the movie I wanted to see when I was a kid. And then he made the movie that he wanted to see as a kid. He cast Ron Perlman, and then he and Ron Perlman became best friends. And and then they were in every movie, he cast Ron Perlman in every single movie he's ever done since then. And this movie is exactly that for him. He grew up watching the Ultraman series. He's a huge fan of Ultraman. He's a big fan of the like early Godzilla films, and it really shows. But I really like him as a director. I loved Pan's Labyrinth. I loved Hellboy. I loved Hellboy 2. So I've never had any problems with any of his films, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some people say some things about his latest film, the ghost film Crimson Peak. Is that it?
Oh, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I heard there was, if you had certain expectations, you were going to be let down. Because he does always do
his fault. That was more the marketing team's fault, but...
Yeah, he does always do his own thing. You can't follow him for that. And really, I think he's got the style and the visual artistry of someone like Zack Snyder or Michael Bay, without having to subtract from like a clear vision and a story. Like he does build worlds. He does tell really unique stories. And I think in Pacific Rim, one of the big things you can fault him on is the story. I would disagree. I think it's aspects of the story. Yeah. I think the story itself is incredibly solid.
Yeah, he does build a really cool world in Pacific Rim.
Sure, it's how it's told, it's some of the execution, but I think the story is great and it's really there. I think Guillermo del Toro, makes movies for, like you said, the fans, but it's really for him. Like you said,
Yeah,
he makes
he
movies
makes it
for
for
himself. And he's obviously a talented artist in not the, indie filmmaker way or the auteur filmmaker way of saying it. I think he's an artist, a literal traditional artist working in film and caring about the format and how you tell a story in the format, using it uniquely. I don't think we have a lot of people who do that nowadays.
No, yeah.
And he's one of the few.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, to get into the movie a little bit, there really wasn't much marketing for this movie, which is kind of why it didn't do as well as they wanted it to in the box office, to be perfectly honest. Whenever this movie was in first in development, it was actually a spin-off of what he originally wanted to do, which was In the Mountains of Madness or whatever, the Cthulhu story.
The Lovecraft story, yes.
Or yeah, well, I mean, it's about Cthulhu, right? That one specifically is about Cthulhu.
No, it's not.
It's not? I thought that one was.
Nope.
Anyway, whatever. Anyway, moving on. He wanted to do that film, and he really, really, really wanted to do that film. And then he started coming up with this idea for an original monster film that kind of harkened back, like I said, to like the Ultraman series and stuff that he really liked when he was a kid. And so the studio kind of put a hold on his Mountains of Madness and decided to let him start developing this film. And then during the same time, whenever he started developing this film, was the same time that the same studio, Legendary Pictures, got the rights to do Godzilla. And so there's this weird thing where, first of all, a lot of the audience members, before they really started doing any sort of marketing, thought that this movie was the placeholder title for Godzilla.
Yeah.
And that was confusing in itself. And then the marketing started for this movie, and we found out it wasn't, but they just didn't really, like, distinguish it in its marketing. They didn't really show you what it was all about until, like, the final trailer, and by that time, there wasn't enough time to build up hype for it.
I think I remember the original trailer that showed Gypsy Danger walking through the street with the giant cargo
the baseball
container
bat.
boat.
Yeah.
And I remember that being a big deal. And I think maybe the original trailers focused too much on the mechs and didn't differentiate them from the kaiju, and it was kind of just confusing on what was happening.
They really didn't talk about the story in the trailers at all. Like, nothing. Like, I'm all for hiding stuff in the trailers, but, like, I had no idea what the movie was about other than, a giant robot punching a kaiju. Like, I'm in, but, like, I have no idea what the actual story is.
They really sold this movie before it opened as a stupid, dumb action movie. Mm-hmm. They 100%. They thought it was like the marketing campaign for Cowboys versus Aliens. Like, they were trying to sell the ridiculousness of it, where I don't think that Guillermo del Toro thought it was ridiculous.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous in the way they were trying to market it.
Yes.
Like, he was going over the top with the action and stuff, but the rest of the movie is not over the top at all. So, like, whenever it gets to action scenes, it is really over the top and really cool, but, the actual story elements and the characters and the plot don't go that over the top route most of the time.
So jumping into the story, it centers around Charlie Hunnam's character, who is named Raleigh Beckett, and his brother Yancey and him are kaiju fighters, these Jaeger pilots. Jaegers are the mechs in the film, and it's really about this program that after these kaiju start showing up out of this portal in the abyss in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, we created our own monsters. We created these mechs to fight them with, and I mean, there's a great backstory in the prequel comic. What's the name of that?
Year Zero, I believe.
Year Zero. It's a great prequel comic that goes into like the first Jaeger they built, and goes into Pentecost's character when he was still a full-on Jaeger pilot. It goes into all of that. But so basically, you have Charlie Hunnam's character, Raleigh, who his brother Yancey and him were drift compatible. It takes two people to run these mechs, and in the middle of a fight, his brother dies, ripped away from him right in mid-drift, and it's just traumatizing for him.
Yeah.
And from that, he quits being a Jaeger pilot. He's he's a construction worker on this new wall program
which was the worst idea in the world.
Taking all the funding away from the Jaeger program. And it's kind of just a movie that really wants you to root for these Jaeger pilots. They were these heroes, almost like astronauts. I think that's the closest analogy. They were treated like astronauts where back in the day when they walked on the moon, they were heroes. They couldn't go into a restaurant and pay for their own meal. I mean, that's what these Jaeger pilots were, and they were winning. They were doing good. But after a string of losses with these larger and larger kaiju coming out of the rift, the world turned to these walls to protect them that obviously didn't. And and these pilots, there were barely any of them left. And those that did, they all congregated in Hong Kong and tried to stage one last big attack to end the war. I mean, that's the plot of the movie, but it obviously goes way more in depth with Pentecost's adopted daughter, Mako, and her story, and her wanting to be a pilot, and Raleigh's relationship with her, and coming back into the force and being a pilot again. There's some deep threads in here. I mean, it's nothing about this movie is subtle, but I feel like there's subplot on top of subplot that all works together really, really well.
It really does.
It just moves really, really quickly.
It does, and unfortunately, the one of the problems with this story is that, like several other movies that have come out, I feel like this movie could have used maybe another movie to explain half the stuff that's going on. They kind of have to force exposition on you so much in this movie, trying to tell you, hey, this is what's going on in the story now, and they have a character. Raleigh is like the voiceover. Most of the time, telling you exactly what's going on and why the characters are doing what they're doing and why they're acting the way they're doing and why this Jaeger is less powerful than this Jaeger. And
every character has a moment of exposition where they just dump exposition from their character's point of view, from something is their specialty. This is extremely, extremely exposition heavy.
Yeah, definitely. And that is one downside of the story is the actual base storylines and the characters and what they're doing and how they're evolving through the story works. But unfortunately, because there's so much to explain, because the world is kind of a complicated place, they have to exposition dump so much sometimes that it becomes overwhelming to the viewer. To be perfectly honest,
it's a huge world, and they really built a unique world. I mean, you need that exposition because there's so much going on, and it really does aid the story. I think my experience first seeing this film back in 2013, I've only seen this movie 2 or 3 times, counting last night. And the first time I saw it, I think last night had to be my second time seeing it. Even though I'm a huge monster fan and a huge kaiju fan, I got a really bad taste in my mouth the first time I watched this. It really disappointed me. I was really excited about it. And I really feel like this is a 2-watch movie. You watch it the first time to get that world, get a sense of what's going on, see some cool action. Second time you watch it, you have that information to dig a little deeper. And really, if you can track down the comic, that helps a ton too. Because once I was comfortable rewatching this last night and comfortable with the world, I mean, I loved it. I loved the throwbacks to anime and to classic kaiju films, and this is a really deep and heavy film in just the sense of what it's trying to pull off and what world it's trying to create. It really works.
Definitely. I mean, and that's the biggest thing is, Del Toro, that he whenever he's trying to build a world, he goes all out. I mean, he's not gonna half acid, I guess. Excuse the language. But he's not going to do that. He wants to put a lot of depth into the world. He wants, to the point, to make it so that you want to read the prequel comic because there is interesting stuff that happened in the past that we didn't get to see. Like, why is Pentecost the way he is? What is the actual relationship between Raleigh and Yancey before Yancey dies?
The flashback scene to Mako as a child and Pentecost saving her, that's just a little 10, 15-minute scene, and it's an attack in the past on just one of the cities. It's Tokyo, right?
It's Tokyo.
Yeah, that one scene is better than countless really held up high giant monster films. I mean, the one scene is an amazing classic giant monster attack on a city, and it's expertly done. I mean, through the eyes of a little girl. It's amazing.
Where she's getting chased by Ebra, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And just the talking about the world building, the production design in this film. So many sets, real life sets, obviously aided by CGI. But whenever they're in their Hong Kong base, you can tell so much of that is real and it's just really, really well done and created amazingly.
Yeah, and the movie definitely has a unique style to it. I have stuff to say about the CGI later once we get to the monsters and the Jaegers, but the actual style of the movie is consistent, and it's really, really cool. The cinematography is really interesting because they use a lot of blues and oranges throughout the entire film. It's just a really I keep saying it's a unique world, but it is. It's just it's a well thought out. This is how this stuff works, and this is what it looks like, and it looks really cool. And like you said, I think the actual pilots, the actual like inside the head is practical. To a certain extent.
You want to talk about practical? I did a little research on this film, and we were talking about with Godzilla Resurgence and how it's like a mixture of CGI and practical. More of this movie is practical than you think, like a lot more. There's certain scenes where the Jaegers are fighting the kaiju where, say, Gypsy Danger's fist goes through an office building. The interior of that office building being destroyed by a giant fist, practical.
Oh, really?
Completely practical.
That's cool.
and I mean, so much of it is practical. Like some of the shots of the head going down into the body of the Jaeger is done with miniatures. It's crazy how far Guillermo del Toro goes to use practical whenever he can. I mean, look at the Hellboy movies.
Yeah,
those are
absolutely.
almost 75% practical, and that's insane.
All right. I really like this movie, but I have to play devil's advocate. I have seen the movie probably 2 or 3 times more than you have.
Mm-hmm.
Not much more, but I have seen it a few times more than you have. And I do, after watching it so many times, I do have a few more little complaints about just certain things. And my wife and I, when we were watching it last night, got into a huge discussion. And she's trying to become a scientist, so she knows all about like genetics and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to explain to her that, like, I don't think that whenever they drop the exposition bomb of the kaiju being clones of each other is a very effective exposition bomb, because saying they're clones of each other as far as a moviegoer experience goes, that means they look exactly the same. Like, they're the same person. You know what I mean? Like, whenever you hear clone in a movie sense, it means like, oh, you took me and you made another me, and that me is running around. That's not what they mean by clones whenever he's talking about the kaiju.
It's very fresh in my mind. I just finished the film last night. Charlie Day does specifically say in that scene, we thought since they don't look the same that they were all different, but they're clones.
He says it, but the thing is that he drops that exposition bomb, and then they immediately have to move on from it.
Yeah.
So like they don't,
like everything in this film,
like everything else. Yeah. So it's like he drops that exposition bomb saying they're clones, and yeah, we thought they were completely different. From some of their. They were different creatures, blah, 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 blah. But, like, he doesn't go into it more than that other than just saying, no, they're clones. They have the same DNA. And then they just move on. And it's just like, what does that mean?
I think the main point of that was just, it was our first reveal that they're manufactured. They're not natural creatures. Yeah.
No, I get that. And I do understand that. It's just, as an exposition point in the film, that doesn't really work. To me, looking at it as trying to be a general audience member, obviously my giant monster brain and my nerdiness of it knows, oh yeah, I know what they mean, I know what they're doing. But from a general audience perspective, I think that there's a lot of things like that in this movie where they kind of just throw stuff at you and then they have to move on and they expect you to kind of grasp what they're doing, and sometimes I don't think that works to the full extent. Now, the actual, like I said, the actual structure of the plot it does work really well. I think that I really like how, especially the beginning of this film where they do the exposition dump of what the world is. Like that sequence is just really cool when they're talking about K-Day, and they're talking about K-Day is for the audience, it's, the day that the first kaiju appeared in San Francisco. They're talking about how that attack went down and how they just kept coming, and they show all these really cool sequences of like how after a while the kaiju started being used to sell toys and to all this stuff, when the Jaegers were at their highest of abilities. And it's just, it really does build that world at the beginning, but then when they try and build the world as they're continuing on, it kind of has little step falls, like where it just trips over itself.
This really should have been a couple movies.
Yeah.
That's true, but maybe he knew he wouldn't be able to get anything after this. But we're getting a second film out of it, so
we'll talk about the second film after we're done with the first film.
Yeah, but I mean, I just after 2 watches, again, I was blown away by this movie last night. I've seen it before. I followed its production, but I really think it needs a rewatch. But even saying that, I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best giant monster films out there, period.
Yeah.
Saying that, it does have a lot stacked against it as well. Again, the pacing is breakneck fast. You have to keep with this. The fact that you need to watch it twice to really fall in love with this film, that's a negative. That is a negative. Yeah. And Mako and Charlie Hunnam's character, Raleigh, they have zero chemistry. They have no chemistry whatsoever. I like both actors. I like Charlie Hunnam in here a lot more than you did, I think. But I think they have no chemistry together. I don't buy that love story. I possibly buy the friendship and the drift compatibility. I think that a couple scenes really play that up and do well.
Yeah, I buy it. I do buy it more as a friendship, and I think that's a mistake they kind of made, was trying to make it somewhat romantic. Because I questioned that last night when I was watching it as well. I was like, is this supposed to be a romantic relationship?
Yeah.
Or is it supposed to be they're just friends? But no, it's not that I didn't like Charlie Hunnam in this movie. It's just that I really feel like he can hit one note and he just stays at it. He's definitely a one note actor. Like, he plays a character on a show called Sons of Anarchy. And it's the exact same character that he plays here, except he doesn't pilot a giant mech. Like they're the exact same person. So it's just kind of hard for me to look past certain aspects of him trying to act. And Mako, well, I mean, she was a first time actress, I think, in this film. Mm-hmm. And I mean, she does okay.
I think she grows into it as the movie goes along.
Yeah, she does okay. There's nothing. I don't have any problems specifically with her, but like. You're right, though. They have no chemistry in this movie between the two of them. They're supposed to be our romantic love interests for the movie. I will
say that the subplots we're supposed to care about, they all come to a head at the end of the movie. They all kind of have their own little finishes all together, almost montage style. Yeah. And those did work for me a lot more this time. They actually had an emotional impact. Let's just run through them.
Like you're talking about, for instance, Pentecost and what he's going through, how he's dying.
Pentecost and him dying and his daughter.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. And his daughter dealing with trying to like let her go and all that stuff.
That really worked for me. For some reason, I know people hate this, but the Australian duo, the father and son, that worked for me. That totally worked for me this time. It was heartfelt.
Yeah, it works. I almost wish they had shown a little bit more between them. Yeah. Because it like the scene at the end, whenever the son is going off with Pentecost to drive Strike Eureka, that scene is really effective. Like that scene has always been effective for me. But like their relationship, other than that scene, is kind of ambiguous. Like other than the son being a jerk.
I like the idea of the whole drift compatibility and how it ends up with siblings so often and family members. And I like the idea of like a father and son who drift with each other, have zero secrets, which I think a father and son, there is like a kind of a barrier there in general. Yeah. Like I don't know. It's that relationship. It's not as open generally. So yeah, to have that kind of story going on in the background, I just focused on it more this time and thought about the intricacies of it, and it really pushed me there at the end. And further on, Mako and Raleigh's characters, them, becoming drift compatible, and yeah, they're supposed to fall in love. But I really like the scene where they're sitting on the catwalks and Gypsy Danger is being repaired behind them. They're just kind of learning about each other and learning more about each other. And we're about to go into that flashback with her character. That really worked for me. That helped build that drift compatibility and why they should be together and how hard Raleigh fights to have her as his partner.
Yeah.
if you take the love aspect out of it, all of that really works. And so
yeah,
I kind
it
of
does.
just did.
It does. It really does. I think the two characters that we haven't talked about yet is Charlie Day's character and Burn Gorman's character.
Yeah.
The two scientists, which Charlie Day's character, their little shtick is actually really cool. I always liked their
it's really
their
funny.
banter between each other and stuff
And
like
it's
that.
sweet at the end. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I don't want to spoil that, but they have that moment at the
We're
end.
discussing the film. It's from 2013.
They have the moment at the end where they drift with each other with the kaiju brain, and
Yeah.
it's a really cool moment and a really nice moment
And
where
the
they
idea
realize
that they're not
Yeah.
idea that they're not pilots and they get to drift, it's like you can see them light up when they come to that idea that they get to drift together like pilots do, and they get really super excited like little kids about to play with their toys.
Yeah, definitely.
I like that relationship. I like that a lot.
No, yeah, I do too, and I think his Charlie Day's character specifically is one of the driving forces of this film to a certain extent. Like he may seem like a side character, but really he's kind of one of the main characters of the film.
He wins the war.
Yeah, he really is. He wins the war. He just kind of. He pushes things along almost more so than any of the other people, because the other people are just like, oh, let's just drop the nuke. And he's like, well, wait, maybe we shouldn't just go do that. It's like, maybe that's not going to work. And then, you have Ron Perlman as a bit part as Hannibal Chow, which he's pretty funny as the character he plays. Nothing really too much to go into with him. He's the kaiju, he takes all the dead kaiju and cuts their body parts up and sells it to the highest bidder, the black market kaiju dealer, if you will.
Now, to be fair, he gets the mid-credit fake-out scene, where you think like it's gonna pull like a Godzilla 98 on this slow push in on the monster's stomach. You think like maybe another monster's gonna jump up or something, and Ron Perlman comes out alive. Don't they make a real big point in this movie that their blood is toxic?
Oh yeah, he's dead.
Okay, I didn't know if that was maybe he's immune or.
No, well, maybe he is. I don't know.
But
him coming out of the kaiju's belly was supposed to be like he's the ultimate badass. He survived being swallowed by a kaiju. Like I don't know. The characters themselves individually and their arcs with like one other character or two other characters really work well. But like I was saying earlier, sometimes whenever they're interacting as a whole, it doesn't. They just there's some of the actors that just don't have chemistry with the others, and it just whenever they interact with the other people, like it seems really forced. But to a certain extent, maybe it should. Some of them are kind of jerks. Now
I know there's a certain part of our audience right now being like, oh my gosh, why are they talking about the character interactions and the plot points of Pacific Rim? For those people, I say we now move on to the action, the kaiju, the mechs, the Jaegers.
I have one more thing to say about the plot, real quick.
Okay, one more thing. Go ahead.
In response to exactly what you just said, if listeners to us don't care about spoilers and they're listening to us before they even think about checking out Pacific Rim, just know that the reason why we are talking about the characters so much is because the character interactions and stuff take up a good, I won't say 3/4 of the movie, but it's close to that. Like the movie really has a real slow section in the middle of it where you're literally just dealing with the characters. There's not much kaiju action going on. There's plenty of kaiju action in the film, but it's just there is a big section of the film in the middle where it is just characters dealing with each other.
And you do get the flashbacks in that section and things like
right,
that.
Yeah,
but
there's stuff peppered in there, but like there's good reason why we were talking about the story stuff, but I am perfectly happy to move on to the kaiju stuff.
Yeah, so you can obviously tell with these, with the kaiju and the Jaegers, Guillermo del Toro is mixing a lot of elements here of what he's a fan of. I mean, you've got some old school Showa era Gamera villains almost making appearances.
Yeah,
You've got Evangelion references left and right. It's all over the place. I mean, there's definitely some Gundam-esque elements.
Yes, definitely.
It's really great. I mean, just the fact that the pilots, they have to do this whole drift compatible thing. I feel like that's an original idea. Is that from anything specific? Like the idea of like two people coming together telekinetically?
I mean, I'm sure it's been used somewhere in anime or something like that, but I don't know a specific instance of it being used.
But just the fact that their actual movements inside the cockpit, instead of having controls or joysticks or anything, them actually punching to punch with the robot. I mean, that's straight out of G Gundam.
Yeah, no, it's definitely that, like the Japanese influence is definitely strong in this movie, and it's good that it's there. Like I was saying earlier, like he is a huge fan of Ultraman and stuff, and you can definitely see that in some of the kaiju designs. And one of the cool things with the kaiju specifically, and I loved that he did this, is that he really wanted most of the kaiju, with the exception of like 2 of them, to really look like if they had an unlimited budget, a man in a suit could have been inside the kaiju. So they still kept that same humanoid form to it, which really, we talked about this back in our Cloverfield episode. That was one of the problems with Clover, is that he's so hard to describe. Like, I feel like I could describe all the kaiju that appear in this film in like a sentence.
I think their names describe them pretty well. You've got Knifehead, you've got Leatherback.
Yeah, the fact that they give them names in the movie was a really good idea too. I think that's very clever. The way they do it, they just name them the instant they come out of the breach. They come up with names. No, I mean the kaiju designs are very well done. The Chinese Jaeger, which is Crimson Typhoon, is actually very similar to a Evangelion design that is used in the anime. Mm-hmm. And then the Russian one is very similar to a robot from the Gundam series, like you were saying, the Gundam series. So it's just really cool to see all these little things that he pulled from all these, obviously where a lot of these giant monster movies came from. He didn't look away from the history and the backlog. He instead looked towards it and decided to pull little things forward into his film and use it for the style that he was going for.
Yeah. Now, I know you have an issue with the Category 5 Slattern.
I really
kaiju.
do.
Okay. Go ahead into that.
All right. So, I want to talk about some of the other specific kaiju, but I'll start with Slattern because it's the one that I have the most problem with. The other ones I love, actually. All the other kaiju in the film I love except for Slattern. So, they build up this category system with the kaiju. It starts off, the first kaiju that it shows up is a Category 1, and then they talk about how they were fighting Category 2s for a while, and then Category 3s showed up. They were the ones that started defeating the Jaegers, and then Category 4s were the ones that we primarily see in this film. The only Category 3 I think we actually really see is Knifehead. I think he was a Category 3. Anyway, so they build up the fact that no one's ever seen a Category 5. Like, Category 5 is something that's, obviously it's probably exists because Category 4s exist, but we've never seen one. So they get down to the bottom of the ocean. They're about to try and jump through and blow up the nuke and close the rift. And they're like, oh no, the 2 Category 4s are circling around the rift. Something big's coming through. And they build it up, and the guy, the rockabilly guy, Tendo, yes, he turns to the camera and goes, "It's a Category 5," and it's like, oh man, what is this thing gonna look like? It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be this huge bestial thing. Like, I'm imagining all these crazy, Godzilla monsters in my head that could make a reference to, or just in general, like just large bestial kaiju. And then out comes this thing that looks like a combination of all the other kaiju that we've seen, plus like a squid. And it's just the most underwhelming thing in the world that it looks very similar to all the other kaiju. There's nothing even big, there's not a big difference between it versus some of the other kaiju other than the tentacle legs. And I was describing this to you earlier. Like, I think the reason why this kaiju disappoints me, it's not that the design is bad. The design is great. It's fine. It matches all the other ones. They're clones in a sort of each other, so it makes sense that they would look similar. But the problem is that you look at a movie like Twister, where they have this same category system that they build up throughout the movie. They start with the F1, then they go to the F2, they run into an F3, there's an F4, and then they get to the F5, and they build this thing up throughout the entire movie, just like they do with the Category 5 in this film. And they're talking about how it's like the hand of God. It's like the biggest thing you'll ever see in your life, and it's terrifying. And then whenever they finally get to the F5, it's huge. It is scary. It takes up an entire cornfield. Like, this thing is awful. Like, you just look at it, you're just like, oh man, I don't know how these guys are going to do what they're trying to do, because that thing is
Bill Paxton
terrifying.
Get out of this one, guys?
Right, pretty much. But it's just like, that's the feeling I wanted to get whenever I saw this kaiju. I would have rather this kaiju had popped out and it be like 200 meters like tall or long, like just like literally just be this bestial thing that like overwhelms the other category 4s that are there. It's like, it's just big, like king kaiju, you know, like this big crazy thing. But instead they just kind of went the safe route and just made something very similar to what they did before. And it doesn't, the only thing that it does that the other ones don't do is it survives the nuke blast. And that's it. That's the only thing that it does.
Okay, I will respond to this. I do believe that a lot is taken away from it by the fact that we're seeing it underwater and the other kaiju are swimming around, whereas it's like walking. I do think if you just look at the sizes off of like Wikipedia and resources of the film, it is way more massive. And the actual design of it that you don't really see very clearly in the movie, it is very like King Ghidorah almost inspired. It's got 3 tails. It's got these Cthulhu tentacles. It's this huge hammerhead shark head that's rising above, and it walks on like multiple legs. It really is this massive thing that in other kaiju movies, like, you know, you'd have multiple kaiju ganging up to fight it. I really think we got that. It was just not represented well on screen. You didn't really see it. It was very hectic in that battle. Right,
because they brought it out, and then because they were rushing to get to the finale at that point almost, like they didn't have time to show how badass it was, because they killed the other Jaegers in the previous battle, which is another thing that I have to say.
Yeah, we really wanted to get to know those pilots and those Jaegers, and we didn't get a chance, yeah.
They introduce them, and you're like, oh man, that Russian one is really cool. Like, that's, you know, they build up both of them. They say, like, what was the Russian one names? I keep saying Cherno Alpha, right?
Yeah.
So they build that one up. They're like, it was the one that patrolled the Russian border for the last, like, 15 years and stuff like that. So they really build up the fact that, like, that one is just like, it's that old, like, Russian, like, I'm gonna I may be a rusty old machine, but I'm gonna just whoop your butt. Like, and they build that up. And whenever it does fight, whenever you see the brief fight against Leatherback, like it does like do some really cool like punching and stuff. Like it has like a retractable fist thing going on. But then it instantly just like gets ripped apart and they get killed.
Which you can't fault the movie for not having stakes. I mean,
no,
these really badass pilots die super quick and get ripped apart.
Yeah, I'm all for stakes, but the fact is like all the like literally they do that. They kill off they kill the Chinese people first, and then they kill the Russians, just like back to back. It's not like, oh no, one person died, that means the stakes are high, like more people can die. No, they kill off these side characters that we didn't even meet, really. We just heard who they are and what they do. And then they kill both of them real quick so that they can show Gypsy Danger being a badass. Like, I would have liked to see more time spent with the other Jaeger pilots. So I would have cared that they died. And I would have cared that their Jaeger got destroyed.
And to be fair, again, also, with the way the kaiju fight, I thought this was a really good point that this movie does that a lot of other movies hold back on, is when you have these giant monsters, or just monsters in general, and you know, like in a werewolf movie, a lot of times the werewolf will get right up on the main character or something, and where they could easily like rip their throat out real quick or do something and kill them immediately because they're a wild animal, and we know how fast an animal that wants to hurt you can hurt you. For some reason they don't. In so many horror movies and monster movies and even giant monster movies, it's like they're holding back for some reason. These kaiju take every opportunity to get closer, to claw faster, to get in under armor, to bite where they can bite. Wherever their reach is, that's what they go for. They're very vicious and incredibly well represented on screen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, and that's honestly the strongest thing I would have to say about this movie is the kaiju. Or as far as, not this movie as a whole, but just like between the Jaegers and the kaiju, I feel like the kaiju are actually the stronger suit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Jaegers are just kind of generic robots, you know, or mechs. I mean, they do have cool designs to them, but there's nothing really that special. I mean, there's those cool moments where they pull out the cool powers, you know, with the sword and the elbow rocket and stuff like that. Like that was fun, but like that wasn't like the kaiju were just like, they were vicious. They were huge, and like just the way that, like you were talking about, the way they moved, the way they fought was just so like a kaiju would fight, like this huge creature going after something. It looked good. It looked realistic, quote unquote, as far as how they were reacting to the situations. But since we're on the topic of these, I did want to bring up something with the CGI. I'm not the biggest fan of the CGI style that they used. I've liked it. I liked it before, and I do like it. It's just like, I think I do prefer the more 2014, like, super realistic kaiju and stuff designs.
This did have an element of exaggeration to all the designs.
Like a cartoony kind of feel to it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not bad. It works for the movie it's in, because the whole world that they built around
Yes.
it is stylized like that, so it works. But it's just personal preference. I kind of would have rathered see a little bit more realism with some of the things.
And that's why you can't really have a crossover with, like, 2014 Godzilla, because it was going for super realism.
Yeah, like, you'd either have to stylize the Pacific Rim stuff to look more realistic, or you'd have to stylize 2014 Godzilla to look more Pacific Rim-y. Which, granted, that could look really cool. I'm not saying it, it couldn't. I've seen some art from fans that looks fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to see them cross over.
I think it's similar to how if you're watching something like Gundam, like those robots make zero sense.
Oh yeah, make absolutely no
why
sense.
do they have like stars on their head and things like that? But you buy them within the universe, and the style of this universe is set up early on.
Yeah, so like I was saying, it's not that I don't like it. It's just something that I just noticed really on this last viewing of how stylized it is. And some people may actually not like it. Some people may really like it. It's kind of like the whole, you'll relate to this. Some of our audience members may not know what I'm talking about, but Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is kind of actually a good example of how it's so stylized that, to a certain extent, it's going to stand the test of time a little bit better than maybe 2014 will. But I just happen to prefer 2014.
And I think actually the closer analogy is 2014 to a Japanese kaiju film like Suitmation. I think that's the closer analogy, where as an American Godzilla film, they went for super realism, CGI, movement, try to make it as realistic as possible. Whereas you take like the Gamera reboots, the trilogy,
Well,
you have some wacky designs in there, and you have some classic Suitmation with miniatures. But somebody who's already a fan of that, they can buy into it. And I think someone who likes the classic Suitmation style with miniatures and that kind of fighting, that's who this movie and this style was made for.
Yeah, definitely. But no, I mean, the biggest thing that I wanted to say about the kaiju before we move on to kind of our final real thoughts and stuff like that, and talk about the sequel and potential for it. Mm-hmm. I really got to give the props to them for some of the kaiju designs. Specifically, the ones that I really like are the two that they actually fight in the center of the film, which are Otachi and Leatherback. These two kaiju are really cool. Leatherback is basically what I kind of expect the Kong in the Godzilla Legendary Universe to move like. He's basically a gorilla. And just the way that he fights and how he's like this super brawler is just really cool. And like I said, his design, and he has that EMP attack, which is really cool. And then of course Otachi is the one that ends up having wings out of nowhere. It's completely unexpected, and is also pregnant. But what kaiju was your favorite personally?
Easily, I really like Leatherback for the Kong shout out. It was cool to see that realized in that way. That it fights even more vicious, I think, than Peter Jackson's Kong.
Oh, absolutely.
But I really did like, even though it's early, I really like the fight with Knifehead. I think it's only a category 3, but I think it's incredibly vicious. It's got that emotional punch in the throat of his brother being killed by it, literally scratching into the head of the kaiju to rip him out. And it's such a wacky design, but it's doing a little more research for this episode, they actually didn't design that off of the Gamera villain.
No, they didn't. They used a goblin shark, right?
And you can see that when he goes to take a bite out of Gypsy Danger.
Yeah,
and his inner mouth comes out and grabs at it. I thought it was just a great design on him, and I really bought it and really liked it. And in some of the early flashbacks, those kaiju as well, I thought were really, really cool. Those were probably my favorites.
Yeah. So now that you've seen it, you said your first time that you watched it, you didn't enjoy it like at all. You walked away with a bad taste in your mouth, and you've kind of already given a general that you really, really liked it. But what are your final thoughts on it? What are your final thoughts on it as a kaiju film? What are your final thoughts on it extending into the future? And what are your thoughts on the sequel? And then I'll kind of give mine as well.
Okay. I didn't hate it the first time I saw it. I was just really disappointed. I really built it up in my head. I was really expecting it to be like kind of what Godzilla 2014 ended up being, like a realistic take on this stuff. And at the end of the day, I just thought it was like a crazy action movie. And I think I might have the second time I tried to watch it, I think I have tried to watch it 3 times. And the first time I left the theater disappointed. And then I tried to watch it on DVD, and I think I fell asleep. And for something, again, like similar to other movies I've watched, rewatching it last night, it just clicked and fell into place. I knew the backstory. I had read the prequel comic to lead up to it, and I just really bought into this world and wanted to see as much of it as possible. And it gives you that. It gives you multiple flashbacks. It gives you them building the world. You have quiet scenes right along with the crazy action scenes, and the focus on these pilots, because I was expecting that now, and that's what I really wanted out of it, was to learn more about these pilots and see their struggle and what they're dealing with. Those were my expectations for this rewatch, and that really played well for me throughout the entire watching. And I really got some things out of it that I hadn't looked at before or even known to look for. So it really, really worked well for me. I have my nitpicks. It runs way too fast. It breakneck speed. I mean, it would have been like a 3-hour movie if they hadn't done that. But I think splitting this up into a couple films would have done it wonders. And I have no idea what the new movie's going to do, but I mean, being directed by Stephen S. DeKnight, as that was recently announced,
right?
He doesn't have a ton of directing cred, but he's been a producer and a writer on Daredevil. He's directed one of the episodes on there, so we know he can do action. And this is the TV series Daredevil, not the Ben Affleck Daredevil. So this is a guy who I just really hope he doesn't completely give up on the Guillermo del Toro aspects of it, the weird parts. I hope now that they have established this universe, that the next movie just jumps right in, doesn't try to explain everything again. I really want to see, and I really hope they just don't see it the way I think it was marketed. I really hope that he goes into it wanting to tell more stories of these pilots and doesn't just see it as a dumb action movie where you can turn your brain off and watch some big monsters get punched. I really want to see them continue on what this movie did, even though I think the people in charge probably don't want that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually liked this film when I first saw it. I've come to like it more and less at the exact same time over my multiple viewings of it. I think that, like we said earlier, like the fact is that this movie tries to do a lot in a real short amount of time. And it really could have done with like that whole opening sequence, like of the kaiju first attack and the building of the Jaegers and all the stuff that happens in Year Zero, probably should have been a movie in itself. Like that should have been the first Pacific Rim, and this was the sequel. That didn't happen, of course. But looking at it as it is still a good film. It is still a really fun film. And that is something like whenever the kaiju fights are going on, and he's got his elbow rocket, he's got his sword, he's got the baseball bat ship. Like, it is really fun to watch those battles play out. And, like we said, the kaiju themselves, if you're watching it for that side of things, are super vicious. They're super cool looking. They got this cool blue glow to them. Like I said, there's blues and oranges in this entire film. That's what this film does. But I really liked this film. I think that it does stand up against a movie like 2014 Godzilla in quality and what it tried to do. And it does deserve a sequel. However, I feel like we didn't need a sequel for it. The movie kind of ties up what it's doing pretty tightly. And I do think that it could have just kind of been left well enough alone and just moved on and done something different or done a prequel. But I am interested to see what they're going to do with it. Just like you, I think you hit the nail on the head with, I hope that Stephen S. DeKnight doesn't look at this as just the kaiju battle scenes and that stuff. Like, if he does, the sequel is going to fall flat to a certain extent. It needs to continue building on the world that's already there, and it needs to focus on the pilots of the Jaegers, so that whenever we do see the Jaegers fighting the kaiju, like, we know that there are humans inside there that we actually kind of care about. I'm excited to see what happens with the sequel. I mean, granted, the sequel has been going up and down so many times, I almost refuse to believe that it's actually happening. I think it's slated for, like, 2019 in between Godzilla 2 and Kong vs. Godzilla. So, that stuff's going to get here quicker than we all think. So I think that I'm excited for the future for it. I want to see more of this universe, and I think it could be pretty cool.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is why I wanted to start this podcast, because we're coming up to a slate of just movie after movie after movie, giant monster related, and now that we're getting, Shin Godzilla and Kong Skull Island news, if this is any sign of the future and maybe a resurgence in giant monster films, I think we're going to be set for a while. On getting excited and hyped up for these things. So really looking forward to Pacific Rim 2. I hope we start seeing some concepts and some ideas thrown out by the filmmakers, just because I want to see which direction they're going with it. But I think we both agree that if you haven't seen Pacific Rim and you call yourself a kaiju or a giant monster fan,
give it a shot.
You need to check it out. And honestly, I think you need to watch it twice. I know that's crazy, and most people would just say, if it doesn't catch me in the first 15 minutes alone, let alone the first rewatching, why would I give it a chance? I really think it plays better on the second time around.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So, crazy episode tonight. We had a lot to talk about. We still kept it pretty tight for the most part, but just with new Godzilla footage and Kong Skull Island footage and talking about just a huge modern giant monster film. This was a big episode, so I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and of course, as always, at the end of our episodes, we announce the next episode that we are doing. And we are going to do a book that has been kind of getting a lot of attention, book series, I should say, in the giant monster kaiju realm called Project Nemesis. I know that one of our listeners has already actually picked up the book just from us mentioning it, and Coleman has yet to actually read it.
You don't know that.
But I've read this book multiple times. I'm on my read-through for the next podcast right now, and I'm enjoying it just as much as I did before. So it's a really unique take on the kaiju genre. It's something really modern, and I would love to see it turned into a film. So we're talking about Project Nemesis next time.
We will be talking about the book, not the new comic series.
Right. I mean, they are the same thing, but we are talking... I've read a few of the issues of the comic, so I can kind of give a brief overview of some of the differences.
Okay.
But yeah, no, we are talking mainly about the actual novel itself. So yeah, so look forward to that.
I'm really looking forward to that. I have started reading it, unlike what you're saying, but and so far it's excellent. So I can't wait to dive into that and talk about a book on the show, which I think a lot of giant monster podcasts or kaiju related podcasts, they're mostly talking about just slogging through the Godzilla films and then maybe talking about something else afterwards. So this is where we're trying to really separate ourselves and get into something that the community I know really loves and gets behind. So
right, definitely.
So look for that next week. As always, jump on iTunes, give us a review or a rating. That really helps get the show out there and more people check it out. Jump on TokyoLivesPodcast.com where you can get up-to-date news. You can get the new Godzilla Resurgence trailer. We started doing trailer breakdowns so you can see shot by shot what we think and what you can really get out of those and hint towards what's going to be in the actual films themselves. So jump on there. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're everywhere. Just find us, subscribe, rate, review. That really helps us, and we know that you're out there and that you're participating in the show and makes us want to keep going.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next time.
I'm Coleman.
I'm Kyle.
Bye, everyone.